Good evening and welcome to this live stream brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Maritime Archaeology. My name's Damien Robinson and I'm the director of this centre and an associate professor here in the School of Archaeology. Now, over the past term, we've been running a twice-weekly series of evening lectures, which has been exploring the ancient port of Alexandria and its relationship to the sea. It's founded by Alexander the Great and is lavishly developed by the Ptolemaic royal family. Then it's further restructured in the Roman period. This is one of the most important ports in the ancient Mediterranean. It's a place of palaces and temples, markets and quaysides. It's one of the ancient wonders of the world. The iconic Lighthouse of Alexandria is there. It's a place of spectacle, political intrigue, warfare, and feverish economic activity. Now, our seminars were inspired by the work of tonight's speaker, Frank Goddio. He's one of the world's leading underwater archaeologists. And over the past 25 years, Frank and his team from the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, in partnership with Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities and with the long-standing support of the Hilti Foundation, they've scientifically explored beneath the waters of the Eastern Harbour and have revealed in stunning detail the extent of the remains of this great port. So over the course of this term, we've seen academic papers on scientific aspects of its archaeology. We've looked at temples and palaces and shipwrecks. We've analysed ceramics. We've looked at the coins. But tonight, though, Frank is going to join all of these together and more and present for the first time a sweeping overview of the Portus Magnus and his phenomenal work there. So if you've got any questions while we're going along, please add them to the comments. And at the end, I'll put these to Frank, to our speaker. When we should have 10 minutes or so to go through them. So now I'll hand over to Frank and give you all his lecture, The Portus Magnus of Alexandria, 25 years of underwater research. Thank you, Frank.
Good evening. Thank you for this very nice introduction. We have here a satellite view of the east port of Alexandria. Since 1992, the European Institute of Underwater Archaeology, together with the Supreme Council of Egyptian Antiquity, have performed geophysics surveys and underwater archaeological excavation in the inside of this port. And the area is defined north by the west and east breakwaters, east by Cape Sicily, and north by the present Corniche. The total area surveyed and on which we work is 268 hectares, which is quite a nice playground for underwater archaeology. For the geophysics survey, since 1992, we apply all new type of geophysic equipment. And we have, as a matter of fact, co-developed with institutions, some of them, like the nuclear resonance magnetometer with the French Center for Atomic Energy, and also the parametric sub-bottom profiler, which is a prototype that we are experiencing and developing nowadays since 4 years with German universities. In order to understand the ancient topography of the Portus Magnus, one has to consider that we have found and discovered land and structures which were emerging in the antiquity up to 8 meters below current sea level. To explain that, you have to take into account that the sea level has risen by about 2 meters in 2000 years, about 10 centimeters a century. That also there is a natural subsidence, a low subsidence of the ground, which has lowered the ancient ground surface by 2 meters, meaning also more or less 10 centimeters by century. But above this, we have found that episodes of soil liquefaction happen that were triggered by natural disasters such earthquake and tidal wave, which caused the collapse of the ancient ground surface up to 4 meters in places. But the natural disaster did not concern only the clay ground. It also altered the rocky ground place. In underwater, important cracks are found on those rocky ground places. And there is evidence that large rocky plates slid down to adjacent deeper area, dragging all existing construction on them. And the heavier the monument on them were, the deeper the rocky plates sank. Another factor, the sea erosion has lowered ancient ground surface and port structures, whether they were already underwater or still staying above water in places. Thus, in order to understand the topography of the ancient Portus Magnus, one must consider that all grounds in and around the present eastport lying underwater at less than 6.5 meters below current sea level were emerging land in ancient times. And that all grounds lying underwater between 6.5 meters to 8 meters below current sea level were dangerous reefs in ancient times. And to illustrate the action of the ground subsidence and of the sea erosion, look at this representation of the diamond rock in 1798. High protruding rock from the seawater. Nowadays, it is there, lying totally underwater. It has totally disappeared in 220 years. During 25 years of survey and archaeological underwater excavation, we have revealed that important stratigraphy resulting from 2,300 years of occupation of the Portus Magnus can still be excavated without any problem. And you see here a picture of one of our excavation in the Portus Magnus, and you see the different archaeological strata here. We have also faced that important coastal and Nile sedimentation happen especially inside the port basin. We have sometimes up to 4 to 5 meter recent sediment at the bottom of the ancient port basin. And we found also evidence of sea erosion and dredging, which have in some place, unfortunately, erased the archaeological strata. What we can say today is that after several natural disasters, the Portus Magnus was finally totally submerged at the end of the 8th century AD. Let us go back to our satellite view and let us perform in that area a very detailed multi-beam bathymetric survey. Here it is. You see on that picture some relief at the bottom of the water. The deeper the blue is, the deeper the water is. And the shallower water are there in yellow and orange. The shape that you are seeing underwater here are like a ghost of the topography of the past. we have performed thousands of reconnaissance and hundreds of archaeological excavation in order to precise and define the contour of the land and to sometimes confirm that we were seeing in the bathymetric map. But during those excavations, we have also discovered many structures which were totally hidden under the sediment. During the excavation, we also discover monument and ancient structure which were lying once upon a time on those sunken land, now sunken lands. You have here a full topography of the Portus Magnus, and on the land we can now post the major monuments that we have discovered, which are represented in red here, and also some antique structure which existed at that time, which are in white. Everything we have discovered confirms what we knew from the ancient texts. And we can put name now on some of those port structures and even on some of the monuments. East of the Portus Magnus were the royal quarters. West of the Portus Magnus were the Navalia. Let us see and go to the royal quarters now. We have a nice description of those royal quarters by Strabo, the geographer who lived 5 years in Alexandria from 26 BC to 20 BC. And he's telling us that the great harbor, the Portus Magnus, was composed of several ports. Yes, indeed, there is several ports. We can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe 5 ports here, if ever that modern dike is covering an ancient dike called Diabatra in the ancient text. And he's saying that the port, all the ports were deep enough in order to allow big ships to moor at the mole. And yes, he's right, all the ports are minimum 3 meters deep. So this port here being much deeper. Let us go now and see them one by one. Let us consider the North Port here. Strabo is talking about it. He says that on the Cape Prochias was a palace, and under the Cape Prochias lie an harbor that was dug by the hand of man and is hidden from the view, the private property of the king. That port, which was a port, the royal port of the Galley, covered an area of 7 hectares. There is here a beautiful dike built of superb limestone block, and the port is highly protected by a large breakwater built of mortar and limestone block. Very impressive. It is in that port that we found 6 meters of modern sediment. That port was much deeper than you could see here. The second port we have going southward is a very big port, 15 hectares. It is protected by a large breakwater. And look at this here. You can see the breakwater, and you have a close-up of that breakwater here. You can first see that it has been cut in several parts by earthquake, unfortunately. That breakwater is 250 meters long, 21 meters wide. And here you see some structure which allow, of course, to put a chain between this land here and the tip of this breakwater. Thus, most probably, there was a chain closing these military port areas. Third port, it's a central port. We call it the port of the Emporium because it is just in front of the Emporium. It is closed on the north by a beautiful peninsula, towards the west by an island, and the north coast. It has a wide entrance and a second passage here, which allows the circulation of the water. Very well done. But Strabo is describing also an island with a small rural port. He described Antirhodos is an isle lying off the artificial harbor, which has a rural palace and a small harbor. The harbor of Antirhodos Island is very well sheltered by a southwest dike here and a counter dike to the north here, which is totally buried now under the sediment. That port is covered 3 hectares, whereas the port of the Emporium give an additional 13 hectares of port structure. But we have a change during Roman time. It happened that around 50 AD, an earthquake struck Antirhodos Island. The rural harbor of Antirhodos since that time was converted into a trading port. And on the 2nd century AD, Antirhodos Island was no longer a rural place. And a large breakwater was built by the Roman with huge mortar blocks, 13 meter by 3 meter by 3 meter, creating a beautiful, large, vast port of 16 hectares, just facing the very famous temple of the Caesarium, the temple of the Caesars. I propose to you to visit the Portus Magnus. Please follow the guide. We will go first, we will leave the palace of Cape Locas, take that dike, and sail at the exit of the port of the Galley to that area here. That area attracted our attention very much because, as you can see here, it is literally covered with limestone block of 1 cubic meter. 1 cubic meter limestone block are quite unusual in the construction of building. You normally build with parallelopipedic block, not with cubic block. During excavation, we saw that those blocks were going down with a light slope under the sediment and continuing under the sediment. Here you have the area which were emerging land in the antiquity. And we could, studying this area, see that there is several inclined planes in different directions. Towards the south, a very big one with a slipway. Towards the east, another one. And towards the north, a large inclined plane. We are there, obviously, in a dockyard, shipyard, in a shipyard. And that royal shipyard is mentioned by several authors. Caesar say, and the secret royal dockyard, there were all ships. Yes, we are there most probably in the royal shipyard of the Ptolemies. Let us go on with the visit, and from that shipyard, let's consider this area, central area of the rural quarters. If we post all the fragments of the red granite columns on those land, you can see them represented as pink dots. There is hundreds of them. And this gives you an idea of what could look like the Portus Magnus in the antiquity with all those colonnades all around. You have here the representation of all those columns underwater. And it must have looked very much like this representation that is thought to be a representation of Stabiæ's port, with those columns bordering the port basin with statues on them and colonnades here. Let us first visit this peninsula protruding from the ancient coast. That peninsula is described by Strabo himself. He says the Poseidon is an elbow of land projecting from the Emporium and having a temple to Poseidon. Thus, it's worth visiting that place of the Portus Magnus. Follow the guide. We will start to swim above this very large paved walkway leading to a large temple there. That walkway is as a foundation of mortar and limestone contained within wooden posts and planking, and all the ground around is reinforced by wooden posts. Very interestingly enough, also, among the limestone slabs are hundreds of different stone anchors which are used as pavement. And on each part of this walkway are red granite columns. It must have been extremely beautiful. Following that walkway, we will reach the temple of Poseidon. You have here a 3D stereophotogrammetry of the whole area, which is 80 meters by about 50 meters. And you can see here the limestone block foundation of a temple with a large here mortar blocks as foundation, and south to it, all the granite columns of the temple, which has collapsed towards the south. As a matter of fact, all the monuments of the Portus Magnus collapsed toward the south. You have here on a bathymetric map, the posted in white all the limestone block which are remaining from the foundation, and all the red granite columns which are here in pink towards the south. And in gray here, you have the large mortar blocks. Facing that temple is a small lake, beautifully built with limestone blocks. And you have a landing stage controlled by a tower towards the south. On the site, all the ground is reinforced with wooden posts, which has been most probably done after the construction of the temple after maybe a small disaster. You can see here the large limestone block and of course, red granite columns everywhere. The columns must have been about 6 meters high. In the area of the temple, we have discovered beautiful artifacts, this head of a Ptolemaic priest made of granite, this marble head of Antonia Minor, but very interesting, this element bearing hieroglyph. It's a fragment of an obelisk, and around that fragment were ships of granite proceeding from the same artifact, meaning that most probably there was one, maybe two, we don't know, obelisk posted in front of that temple. And those obelisks were brought from Heliopolis, and they date back from the time of Seti I, 13th century BC. You have also quartzite sphinx, which are associated with this temple. Small artifacts have been found on the area, which has been heavily looted anyhow. Ceramic from the 1st BC to the 1st AD. The upper strata has been totally eroded and by the sea and is no longer available. Some jewelry and some nice bronze statuettes. From the temple, let us swim towards the end of this peninsula in a very interesting area mentioned by Strabo himself. He says at the elbow, on this elbow of land, the Poseidon, Antony added a mole projecting still further in the middle of a harbor, and on the extremity of it, he built a royal lodge, which is called Timonium. This is where he was spending days with Cleopatra VII. We are there. You see the peninsula of the Poseidon, and here a large mole. And if we zoom here, you will see the vestiges of a monument there, which is still under excavation. It's a 30 by 30 meter monument, beautifully built with limestone block, the ground being reinforced by wooden post and planking, dating back from perfectly the end of the Ptolemaic period, as you can see in the carbon-14 data that we have done. This monument has been heavily looted, and very few things remain. And we have evidence that it has been on purpose destroyed and that something has been rebuilt further on that side. You can see here some of the artifacts, some architectonic elements, amphora from the end of the 1st century BC, and some gold uraeus dating back from Antinonius Pius and Caracalla. Very few things, but the excavation are still going on. From that area, let us swim above the ancient coast here. The whole ancient coast and walls are beautifully paved with limestone slabs, and it's literally littered by red granite columns everywhere. Swimming alongside the coast, you will meet some Egyptian gods, Thoth, Agathodaimon. You will encounter sphinxes, like this one, and many red granite blocks bearing hieroglyphs. Of course, all those artifacts that you can see now were totally buried under the sediment before the excavations. From the ancient coast, let us visit now Antirhodos Island. It's a very important place. It's worth seeing in the Portus Magnus. Antirhodos is an eye lying off the artificial harbor, which has a royal palace and a small harbor. Let us go first, of course, to the main monument of that island on the main branch, on the site which must have been, once upon a time, the palace, of course. And there, unfortunately, you will find a chaos of big limestone blocks. The site has been extremely looted in antiquity. This monument covers an area of 68 meters by 23 meters, altogether 1,564 square meters. It's not a small monument. On it, very little artifact. However, we found some sections of red granite columns, which has been presented to you during this symposium beautifully by Susan Walker. They all bear inscription at the glory of Caracalla, and they were obviously basis for statue of the Roman Emperor Caracalla, erected there in the 3rd century AD. There are 1.05 meter in diameter. And you will see, we know now their origin, as you will see later. Close to the palace, there is also some fragment of door jambs, and one of them is interesting, this one. It bears a hieroglyph, the cartouche of King Apries, but the door jamb has been cut into two, and we found the remaining part more than half kilometer away on the Antique coast. It illustrates the strength of the tidal wave which struck the Portus Magnus and could break and bring one heavy monument of several hundred kilos, half a kilometer away. Close to it, you will see also a nice statue representing a Ptolemaic queen made of marble, higher than nature, and Ptolemaic king most represented as Hermes, most probably Ptolemy III. An interesting spot on this island is the northeast tip. There is the remain of a very old, small wooden jetty dating back from before the foundation of the city of Alexandria. And it has been incorporated during Ptolemaic time within the island. Another very interesting monument on Antirhodos Island is posted here. That monument collapsed on each part of the secondary branch of the island. And this was very lucky for us because everything which is destroyed and collapsed on the land has been later, of course, recuperated or heavily looted. But what is falling and collapsing into the harbor are sometimes protected, and this was the case. We have here all the limestone block proceeding from a monument and a large concentration of red granite columns of 1.05 meter of diameter. As a matter of fact, all the columns which fell above land have been recuperated and used as base of statues for Caracalla in the 3rd century. But those who fell into the port are still there and could not be recuperated. Among them, we found also some architectural elements. And also, the south to the column, we have a very interesting find consisted in a beautiful statue of a priest of Isis holding Osiris Canopus, protected by two Ptolemaic sphinxes. One of them is the likeness of Ptolemy XII, the father of Cleopatra VII. On that temple, which was obviously a temple devoted to Isis and Iseum, we found inside of each part of the island ritual instruments of silver, of bronze, of lead, and beautiful ceramic by hundreds. We can date back this monument thanks to the architectural element and of the artifact. This monument has been founded early 1st century BC and has known quite a great importance starting from the time of Ptolemy XII, father of Cleopatra. You have here, we found several silver coins, 3 or 4 of them of Ptolemy XII, bronze coin of Cleopatra VII, and a gold coin of Augustus here, alongside a beautiful portrait made of rock crystal and important bronze statuette, and among other very interesting artifacts. We can say that the life of this temple started really before or at the time of Ptolemy XII and was totally stopped in 50 AD when it has been struck by, obviously, by an earthquake. There is no artifact among the artifact fallen into the harbor after 50 AD. Let us leave now this center of glory and power where Cleopatra VII had a palace and a temple to Isis, which is very nicely symbolized by these gold rings that we found there, representing an eagle holding a crown in his bill. And let us go on the Antique coast, just in front of it. There, this place was very well known. In the 18th century, 2 obelisks, one of them was still standing and the other one fallen, was marking the temple of to the Caesars, the Caesarium. Caesarium was a temple which was thought to have been built by Cleopatra VII and terminated and extended by Augustus and his followers. But there we can add something interesting. The temple of the Caesars, the Caesarium, was known as maybe the bigger, the most beautiful temple of the antiquity. Just in front of it are the mall of the ancient Portus Magnus. But we could prove by archaeological excavations that starting from the mid-1st century AD or early 1st century AD, a vast portion of land has been reclaimed towards the port. Thus, that temple must have been projected, must have been planned way before Cleopatra VII, because the land has been reclaimed just in front, well before her. All around this area, we found very important statue like this falcon-head crocodile sphinx dating back from the 8th century BC with big ears listening the prayer of the people. A Colossus portrait of the son of Caesar and Cleopatra, Ptolemy XV, Caesarium. The whole statue must have been at least 7 meters high. The remain of a Colossus statue of an Egyptian pharaoh Meremta brought most probably from Heliopolis. Pyramidon of a Naos bearing the cartouche of a Ptolemy king. Red granite altars, and you can see here the material, a very beautiful material like this black, green porphyr, and also those elements here of red granite bearing cartouche of pharaoh. We found many of those. They proceed from very big facilitated red granite columns which have been brought from the temple of Ptah of Memphis. And fortunately enough, we can say now that they have been brought most probably under the rule of Emperor Trajan, and that they have been brought after 114 AD because of a cartouche of Trajan with a special title engraved on it. I have to say that those facilitated columns were perfectly fit for the temple of the Caesars, the temple of the dynasty continuity, as they were proceeding from the temple of Ptah in Memphis, and they were wearing the cartouche of several pharaohs, Thutmose IV, Meremta, Seti II. Let us leave now the royal quarters and let us visit the Navalia towards the west. First, we will see that port, very strange port, protected by a dike, which is not man-made, but it's dug into the rock, and the port is dug into the rock. And that dike is connected to the coast by a walkway or by a dike made of limestone block and wooden posts, which has been dated from the Roman time. And at the western part of that dike is a small monument with red granite columns here. Going north, we will see very nice docks, beautifully built and paved. And their basement is made of wooden posts with limestone block, which have been paved above. They are beautiful. And they all date back from the Roman times. As the Roman has extended the port to the north, also there. Same thing towards the north here. We have a large mall built of big mortar blocks and supported with a basement reinforced by wooden posts there. You have now a vision of the inside of the Portus Magnus, but one can say, but how was looking the whole Portus Magnus? For that, you have first to add all lands which are around the port and to which are nowadays at less than 6.5 meters deep. They were emerging in the antiquity. Here they are from the bathymetric map, the nautical chart. Above this, you have to consider the beautiful work done by Mr. Guarin and Hayes on land, doing a geophysics survey in order to determine the position of the heptastadium, the dike linking the land to the Faroes Island. Here we are. Then you have to take away, of course, the modern structure and take into account the bathymetry of that area, which has been done before the construction of those structure early 20th century. Here we are. And here you can see a satellite view done with a satellite in 30 BC. And you have a nice overview of the Portus Magnus. That Portus Magnus is dating back, this vision, this representation of the Portus Magnus date back from the Ptolemaic time. During Roman time, we have to add this huge breakwater protecting the new port in facing the Caesarium, and the new port built here by the Roman. Let us now look at the connectivity of that port during Ptolemaic time. In red are the connection for the trading ship. Trading ship, you have several entrances. So, main entrance here between the reef, most probably the Diabatra. This is an assumption because it's covered by the modern dike, but it's mentioned in the antiquity. And an islet and very big reefs here, dangerous reefs there. This is the central passage, the main passage. And the secondary passage is there between Faroes Island and those reefs and the island here. We might have a third one here, hypothetical, because here there is a passage, but it's blocked here by the modern dike, and most probably there was a port there. This is hypothetical. Thus, the trading ship could enter both passage here, go towards the port of the Emporium, go out of this port also by the secondary passage if they want, with blowing winds from the northwest, and they could sail to the Onostos port in the west by crossing the two passages into the Heptastad. They could go, of course, into the Navalia here. As for the official boat and the military boat, they could use, of course, the two passages. They had to enter there, cross this entrance crossed by a chain here, and go into the military port, the second port, the port of the galley, and they could also go, of course, to the royal port there. There has been a change during Roman time, of course, because new area were devoted to the trade, the wall of the port of the Emporium, but also Antirhodos port was a trading port there. And this is also confirmed by the shipwrecks that we found there. One of them is the beautiful J3 shipwreck recently presented by Damien during this symposium. And they could live there, go into the port of the Caesarium there, and sail towards the Heptastadium. For the military, they could use the same area there. I think we have there a nice view of the most recent aspect of the Portus Magnus before he was struck and totally destroyed by natural disaster and natural phenomena like rain subsidence and raising of the sea water. Thank you very much. If you have some questions.
Thank you very much, Frank, for that fantastic overview of the development of the port. It really is a kind of monumental project in maritime archaeology. I was wondering if I might ask the first question, what is the balance that you have between the detailed geophysical survey, the underwater survey, and then the excavation? How do you sort of decide what to do with each of these?
As a matter of fact, the survey, geophysics survey, are still going on nowadays because, of course, there is new equipment that we are developing, that we are testing. Thus, there is a combination between during any mission, during the survey and the underwater excavation. And sometimes the underwater excavation are leading to new survey. I will give you an example. In the port of the Galley, we have done the survey, but when we started excavation, we saw that there were 6 meters of modern sediments, and that we had to go much deeper with the sub-bottom parametric sub-bottom profiler in order to reach what could lie under the port, at the bottom of the port of the Galley. Thus, we have to do next mission a new survey on that area because the survey we have done is not sufficient. And I would say that each year we are doing hundreds of dive and excavation hours, and there is a huge amount of knowledge brought to us at each mission.
Mm. So the survey helps you to target where to excavate, and then the excavations lead to more questions, more surveys,
and leads also to more surveys. There is a kind of correspondence. It's very interesting because what we are finding also does fit with the ancient texts. Sometimes the ancient texts lead us to go somewhere. Sometimes we bring more to the ancient texts, and sometimes we make the ancient texts understandable, which were very difficult to understand without what we found there. Yeah. Thus, there is a dialogue between survey, excavation, and prior knowledge from ancient texts.
Mm-hmm. And so have the excavations revealed, things that you've been surprised about from the ancient texts? Or
one of the most surprising, I would say, is the Iseum of the island of Antirhodos, which is highly important because we have 100% evidence that there was a temple of Isis on Antirhodos Island. And when you considered that Ptolemy XII was the first of the Ptolemy to add to his title Neo-Dionysos, meaning the new Osiris, and that he founded that temple to Isis. And then after, Cleopatra VII was known as the Neo-Aphrodite, the new Isis, Cleopatra, who was the new Isis, had a temple to herself nearby her palace on Antirhodos Island. It's quite impressive there. And also, we found out that this port was much bigger, much more, I would say, intelligent, much more efficient than what it was thought to be.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. We've got some questions from the audience, which I'll go through so that you can see them. I think one of the first ones is from Diana, and she asks, how do you deal with the conservation of the statues?
The conservation of the statue. We have two options: whether to let them underwater, whether to bring them on land, to restore them, to soak them into fresh water, to soak them, and then we go to museum. But we have let quite a lot of them underwater because the Supreme Council of Antiquity and the Ministry of Antiquity and Tourism has a project maybe of an underwater museum in the area of the Portus Magnus. Thus, it will be important to have in situ important artifacts left there.
And a couple of other questions from Bruce, Bruce Costa, who's asked about the pavements with the stone anchors on, and how you know that the stone anchors were part of the pavement.
Oh, because we are obviously on land, you know, the substrate is made of mortar mixed with limestone. It's totally delimited by wood and plankings, and the stone anchor are part of the slabs and in a large area which lead towards the temple to Poseidon.
Oh, so there's a really nice kind of juxtaposition of anchors with
with pavement. It is really used as pavement, Yes.
Thank you. And then leading, I suppose, another question is the broken monument that you showed, the one where half of it was 500 meters away. What is the evidence that you have for these tidal waves and for these very destructive events? And is that textual, or is that just archaeological? Or
there is textual, of course. But what is strange, we have a long text about an earthquake dating July 31, 365, whereas ships were found at the top of temple, and tens of thousands of people die from the tidal wave. Okay, fine. But something interesting is that we found also evidence of earthquake or natural disaster which are not mentioned into the text, like the destruction of the Iseum on Antirhodos Island. Absolutely, between 50 and 51, this monument has been struck by a natural disaster. The land collapsed on both parts of the island, together with the wooden posts which were supporting the land, and everything fell and was knocked out on each part of the island. Thus, we have written evidence of tidal wave, and we have also archaeological evidence of tidal wave, and also earthquake, which are not mentioned into texts.
And then there's also, I suppose, the information from the cause that Jean-Philippe Guarin was.
Absolutely. Jean-Philippe Guarin has made a beautiful presentation where he could show the evidence of tidal wave in the Portus Magnus.
Absolutely. We've had a question from Dr. Bob Bianchi, who spoke the other night. Bob says that the architectural fragments and the sculpture that you've discovered are overwhelmingly pharaonic in their view, giving an appearance that was. Do you think the cityscape was pharaonic in its look? And do you have enough information to create a sort of artistic impression of what the colonnaded walkways may look like?
Well, for the colonnades, yes, because we found those red granite columns. We found a statue like the marble statue of Ptolemy III as Hermes, you know. Thus it fit perfectly with the representation of the port of that period. But when you consider, for example, the temple to Poseidon, it's not an Egyptian temple, though they put obelisk in there, as they put as Augustus put also 2 obelisks in the Caesarium, inside the Caesarium, the temenos of the Caesarium. But this temple is pretty much an Egyptian, Greek temple from his side, from his layout. And we have the description of the Caesarium. It doesn't fit with the description of an Egyptian temple, but Bob is right. there is a lot of artifact which has been brought from Heliopolis and from elsewhere of the Cora, but many from Heliopolis, which has been from ancient monument, which has been used during Ptolemaic time or Roman time in order to adorn and to build the monument and the temple of the Portus Magnus. Yes, thus there was a mixture of course, Greek and Egyptian architecture. Absolutely, there is a mixture there, very interesting.
And do you think that there's a difference between the side of the port where the Greek and the Egyptian architecture is, and obviously the Roman developments? Is that much more, much less monumental, more workaday in that way?
Yeah, first, I think that it is the first time that you can see a port with such a layout, with a breakwater protruding from the land and going towards the sea. You know, it's not a kibotos, the Egyptian way, the closed port. No, I would say it has the layout of a modern port with different port basins, those different, and they used the natural disposition, the natural topography in a very clever way in order to extend that port. And of course, the Roman were less maybe interested with cults there than the trade of grain in order to provide Rome with grain, and they expanded the port in a beautiful way. Yes.
One of the most exciting parts for me, something that I've not seen you talk about before, is the sort of the slipways and the discovery of the military port. We've got a question from Aya Mohammed about this, and she wants to know whether you've seen any results there of ship sheds or other facilities, naval facilities.
No, you have to understand that everything which was left on land, you know, has been totally reused, recuperated. And when we found really important artifacts, whether very deep into the strata or inside the port basin when they have collapsed into the port basin. But in such an area, which is totally, I would say, I cannot say paved, but built with a limestone block of 1 cubic meter, you know, you have no strata under, of course, and everything which was above has been, of course, reused, recuperated. And unfortunately, maybe we will have a chance that but we have to do very deep excavation at the extremity of the seaway there. We will do excavation. We have some interesting signals, but it will be a hard work to excavate meters and meters of modern sediment before reaching the archaeological strata. Yeah.
So there's still lots to do, I think, is the...
Oh, there is a lot to do. And the recent surveys that we have done with the parametric sub-bottom profiler show us that there is endless work to do on shipwrecks and on other buried structures.
We've probably got time for another couple of questions. And so, I suppose the first one of these is from Julian Putner, who asks whether you have any new insights about the Pharos itself, the lighthouse. Which
the Pharos by itself would deserve a whole presentation.
Absolutely.
But I would like to show you 2 slides, if you enable me.
Of course.
This one, together with a text of Strabo, who was there. At the extremity of the island of Pharos is a rock which is washed all round by the sea. And you have to understand that you have 2 passages, 1 main passage and 1 secondary passage. I am a sailor and I would hate, absolutely hate, that there is no signal for me on that island there with rocks just before it there. And on that rocks, before the Western Dyke was built, was seen remain of a construction by Mr. Gustave Jandet, who made the whole bathymetry of that area before. Gustave Jandet was the chief engineer of the port of Alexandria, and we have a nice bathymetry and a nice description of him, saying, there is an island, there must have been an island there with construction on it. Interesting, yes, it's sunny. But anyhow, I would say that my little fingers tells me that one day, maybe we will have some clue about the lighthouse. Thank you.
So it's there somewhere, I think.
It's there somewhere, yes.
I think probably the final question that we probably have time for tonight is from Olga, and she says about the publication of all this material. Where is it, or when can we expect it?
We have various publications that we have done already, and the publication of this symposium will result in a 3-volume book about the Portus Magnus, coming soon, I hope, but it will take some time to edit it but it's written, and it will be edited in the coming years.
Yeah. So the overall publication of the Portus Magnus.
There will be an overall publication with topography, the history, the context, the topography, the study of the artifact, and what we can deduct from this.
And so that's you and your team are working on it at the moment, which...
Yes, Damian, you know that we are working together.
I absolutely know that we're working on it at the moment. And also there are various other things. So if you are interested in Frank's work on the Caesarium, for example, and the material that comes from that, Frank and I have just edited a book together, which is called The Sacred Landscapes of the Alexandria and the Northwestern Delta. And there's lots of papers in that, which are kind of preliminary reports that are leading towards this monumental publication of Frank's, which will come from that. So I think now it's about 6:10, that we should thank you very much, Frank, for this incredibly insightful presentation, which has taken us all around your excavations and the artifacts that you've recovered from it and the interpretations that we can draw from it. It's a truly inspirational view, I think, into what maritime archaeology can do when you invest time and effort, and you have a fabulous sponsor to kind of support the work over this 25-year-long period, which is incredible. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of our audience who've watched tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and thank you very much for your questions and everything. So thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody out there. And I'd like to say good night to everybody. So good night.
Good night.